Okay, today is October the 10th, 2007. I'm in Oklahoma City at the Capitol to talk with Sally Kern, who is in the House of Representatives, elected in 2004,
Correct.
re-elected in 2006.
Unopposed.
Unopposed.
That was nice.
And this is part of the Oklahoma State University Library's oral history project entitled Women of the Oklahoma Legislature. So thank you for having me today.
Oh, glad to do it.
Let's start by having you tell a little bit about your childhood, where you were born, and then we'll work forward.
Okay. Well, I was born in Jonesboro, Arkansas, back in 1946. So I'm one of these people. I don't mind telling how old I am. I thank the Lord for every day I've had, so I don't have a problem. And I was born to Marvin Rogers and Ruby Rogers, and they were both from Arkansas. And my dad graduated from Arkansas State University, and that's the first time I thought about this. I don't think my mother graduated from college. But anyway, we grew up. My dad was in insurance, and he was with a particular company, and he would get a promotion and go to another place. And then he ended up getting headquartered in Dallas, Texas. And so we'd be in Dallas, and we'd move to like Wichita, Kansas, then back to Dallas, Kennett, Missouri, back to Dallas, Wichita, Kansas, back to Dallas, Liberal, Kansas. That's where I ended up finally graduating from high school. And then they moved back to Dallas after he retired, and I went to college. And,
in Texas?
Well, yes, I did. To begin with, I started off at Wayland Baptist University out in Plainview, Texas, transferred to Arkansas State University, and would have graduated from there, but my dad was in a very serious accident, and so it happened right when finals started, so I finished finals and went home and got a job working for Procter & Gamble, and just turned my check over to my mother because my dad couldn't work anymore, and she was a real estate agent and in insurance, and so both my whole family's been in insurance, so I said I would never be in insurance. But I worked for about almost a year, and during that time is when I met my husband, and we from the time I first met him till the time we got married was about 6 months. And I wasn't going to get married. I was going to be an old maid missionary. But when I met him, and I just knew he was the right person. I had always felt like I was going to be a missionary, and was very, very content and happy with that. And then when I met him, I just knew he was the one. So we got married. Been married now to be 38 years next January.
Had a higher plan.
So yeah, I'll say there was. But I ended up graduating from from University of Texas at Arlington about a year after we were married. And so I graduated, I think it was in December of 71. And he was working. What was Steve doing at the time? Well, when I met him, he was a bondsman. And he ended up going back to college. And he went to college down in West Palm Beach, Atlantic College down in West Palm Beach, Florida. And we got down there because we started working through a ministry called the True Vine, and we were sent down there to work with street kids. This was back in the early 70s, middle 70s. And so while we were down there, he felt called to preach, and so that's when he went to school down there at Palm Beach Atlantic College. And when he graduated from there, then we went back to Texas, and he went to school at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. And we ended up moving from Fort Worth over to Dallas, not far from where my parents lived. My dad had by that time, he couldn't go back into insurance after his accident, so he and my brother started a janitorial business. So after first semester of seminary, Steve went over there. We got a place to live, and Steve worked at nights in my father's janitorial business, and we'd go to school during the day. And I was, we had a baby then, our first child, Jesse, at that time. And so I just was a stay-at-home mom. And then when he graduated from seminary And when was that? What was that? Golly, 1978, I think it was. We went to our first pastorate in Lone Star, Texas, down in East Texas, and we were there 8 years. And during that time is when I went back to school and got my teacher certification. I had graduated, like I say, from the University of Texas at Arlington, but I didn't have a teaching degree. And I went back when the boys got into school. We had another son too. Nathan came along 2 years later. And once the boys both got in school, I went back to school at nighttime and got my teaching certification and started teaching school there in East Texas. And we were there 8 years, and in 88 we moved. My husband took a pastorate up in Boise, Idaho. And a long way. Grandparents were very upset with us, but that's where we felt the Lord was calling us. So we went to Boise, Idaho, and we were there 7 years. And our oldest son graduated from college there, from high school there, and came back down to Texas. To Oklahoma, went to college at OBU. And we left there and went back. My mother was dying, and so my husband just resigned the church, and we came down and stayed and lived about a year with my folks. And I subbed in Texas, and Steve worked at Central Freight and preached here and there. And about the same time my mother died, then the Lord opened a pastorate here in Oklahoma City. And when was that? That was 1996, I think it was, March of 96. So Steve came up here, and I stayed down in the rest of the school year with my dad and our son, who was graduating from high school down there. And then we came up here at the end of the school year, and been here ever since. So,
more than 7 or 8 years this time.
Oh, yes. It's been a little over 11, I believe. We will probably, Lord willing, retire here. So my husband's pastor of Olivet Baptist Church here in Inner City Church here in Oklahoma City.
Well, what subjects did you teach?
I always taught government. I was a social studies teacher, and all the years that I taught, the one subject that I always taught every year was government. I also taught world history, some U.S. history, economics. And when I came here to Oklahoma, I got a job teaching at an inner city school in Oklahoma City, and I taught government and also taught some Oklahoma history and economics and geography.
So you came by a political arena kind of naturally then?
Well,
perhaps.
I don't know if you'd say naturally. I never, ever, I can honestly say, not once, dreamed of being in politics, running for office. Because I was teaching government, I was very much involved in it as far as pretty much on the national level, because that's pretty much what we studied in the public schools. And I always voted. That's our constitutional right and privilege. And I would try to motivate my students to see that this was their government, and they needed to have a voice in it, and they needed to do that first and foremost by voting. I had contacted, my representatives, my elected officials in the past quite often, but you're looking at a person who, before I felt led to run, had never attended a precinct meeting, had never been to, say, a political club, Republican Women's Club, had never been to a county meeting or a state meeting. And so I guess you want to know how did I get here? Well,
that's my next question.
My husband, being a pastor, and our church being down there in the inner city right off of 10th and Western, right in that area, the state representative for that area asked him one time to come and be chaplain. And then he was asked by our senator for out where we live in the northwest Oklahoma City area. He was asked twice. So he came, and 3 different occasions was the chaplain here in the legislature for a week. And he would come home each time. And he would say to me, Sally, you ought to run for office. You know government. And, I've met some of those guys and you could do this, And I just would laugh at him and say, you must be kidding. I was not interested in the least. I was very happy, very fulfilled being a minister's wife, of course, being a mother, 2 wonderful sons. Was very happy teaching school. I loved teaching school. I loved being with young people. And I had the opportunity to coach here in Oklahoma City. I was a girls softball coach, volleyball coach, and then golf coach. And I do love golf.
Yeah.
And so I was very content. I loved my job. And, both sons were out of the home by now. And so, I could really devote a lot of time to my church and to teaching. And I was very happy. And I just literally laughed at him, said, you must be kidding. Well, after the 3rd time that he was chaplain here, he didn't say any more. And I didn't say anything because I wasn't interested. And I found myself one day in class, we were talking about politicians and campaigns. And the prevailing attitude of my students was this, that politicians are all crooked and they're all rich. And I made a statement that day. I said, look, some are, just like in any profession, you've got crooked people. But I said, they all aren't. And I said, one of these days, Mrs. Kern may run for office, and I hope you know that I'm not rich. After all, I'm just a school teacher and a minister's wife. And I hope you know I'm a person of integrity. So I went home that evening after school, and I'm sitting there in my recliner. And I remember this just like yesterday. And I'm thinking, why in the world did you say that? And never said a word to my husband. Well, you know how an idea just gets in the back of your mind and gnaws at you and won't go away? Well, that was this idea, and it just stayed. And I continued to deal with it and never say anything to my husband. So finally, as a Christian, I felt like, well, maybe I ought to pray about this. So I began praying about it. And the more I prayed about it, the more I felt like I should run. And I'll be quite honest with you, that's when I said, no, Lord, no way. This will get me out of my comfort zone. I don't want to do this. And so I said no, and I struggled. I was miserable for close to a year. And so finally, it's not, no Christian should say no to the Lord and struggle like that. But, especially you would think a preacher's wife or So finally there came a point when I said, Lord, if you want me to run, I'll run. Even though I don't want to do it, I will. And I really, I just had a peace. So I told my husband, I remember I was sitting in the recliner again, and he came home one evening, and he walked in the door, and I looked at him. First thing I said was, I'm running. And he looked at me and said, for what? And I said, I'm running for office. And he said, really? So I told him how I'd been struggling in all this. And so he said, okay. So here I am. I didn't know anybody up the Capitol. To be honest with you, I had never been to our Capitol either. And I didn't know anybody. And Steve had met an individual who had been in the Senate for 4 years, had served under Governor Keating, his positions that he had. And Steve had met her at various meetings. And he said, you need to talk to this individual, and because she can help you out and give you some advice. So I called her up, and we met and had lunch, about a 3.5-hour lunch one day. And our hearts just found together. And so she was like my political advisor. I didn't pay her anything. She wouldn't take anything. I did everything on my own. I was still teaching school, and I would stay up late, working on designing my own brochures, campaign stuff, and call my friend and say, okay, what do you think about this? When something needed to be mailed out, my Sunday school class that I was a member of, I would have 25 ladies, some gentlemen in the house, and we would be, stuffing envelopes and putting stamps on, and writing, and just did all of this, I had a very dear friend that I became a very dear friend that I got to know through all of this, who matter of fact, her husband, I'm not going to name any names, but her husband happens to be ran the same year I did and won. And so she had been working up here, and so she introduced me to a lot of people. She was very helpful. And so when I started running, I really thought that I would run and lose and just be a much better government teacher for having gone through that process. And there were 5 of us. Since it was the first year, we had term limits, and my predecessor could not run again. There were 5 of us in the primary. And about, a few months before the primary, I wanted to win. Once I had gotten invested in the process, I had learned a whole lot. I had a real good sense of where I stood with the people because, I knocked on thousands of doors. I got around my district 3 times. My husband got around once. I had some other friends who got around. And so I wanted to win. And in the primary, I came in first with about 31%, and my predecessor's wife, who had gotten in only about 4.5 months before the primary, came in second. And so, that really scared me because I thought, oh no, she just got in. She's, came in second. She's just building up this momentum. We're going to have a runoff in 3 weeks. So I worked my tail off those 3 weeks, and I beat her 60-40. And then, fortunately, my district is a very conservative district, and I did have a Republican a Democrat in 04, and I think I won almost 69, just under 69% to 31. And so here I am, and in 06, I did not have an opponent. And it's been a wonderful experience. It's been a challenging experience. It's been a learning experience, a growing experience, frustrating experience, just an awesome experience. I'm very honored to be here. I am not a lifelong politician. I have matter of fact, I don't even like to refer to myself as a politician. I try to refer to myself as an elected official or a statesperson, because being a government teacher and a lover of the beginning of our nation, American history, I've studied the founding fathers a lot and spent a lot of time on that when I taught government. And, I think we need statesmen today who their primary goal is to serve the people. And that's what I want to be. I have no higher political aspirations. I don't fault anybody that does, because somebody's got to want to be our next governor, our senator, congressman, but I don't have anything like that. I am proud and honored to serve right where I am, and I try to get out in my district as much as I can. I go to the schools, I try to read, I go to, the school carnivals. I do get the OSU football tickets, and I give them to my schools so that they can use them to raise money to buy, whatever the principal thinks they need, and donate the OSU tickets, the OU Texas tickets to our Northwest Chamber of Commerce, and they brought in $850 this year. So, I try to be out there with the people. So I'm still learning. Every day is, I would try to tell my students there's never a day without learning. And boy, have I learned that being here these past 3 years.
Well, what was your very first day in office like? Can you remember?
Well,
swearing in?
Oh man, it was scary, and it was very awesome and emotional. When I had I was so full of pride when I took that oath, because I'm a very patriotic person. When 9/11 happened, if I had been younger, I would have gone and signed up. I was the first person on my block with an American flag out there, and it hadn't gone down since. Not in the flag though, but I was just so proud. I was so proud to be an American, so proud to be an Oklahoman. And after they swear us in, we punch our button and we get the opportunity to say something. And I could hardly speak without tears, because I was so honored and so proud. And so, this is not anything I'd ever dreamed about. Many of them, this is a fulfillment of a dream. I'm just really honored and privileged to be here, because I know that I'm here because this is where the Lord wanted me to serve, first of all, Him, and then secondly, my constituents and all the great citizens of the state. And it's just a wonderful honor.
What has been your biggest hurdle to date?
Gosh, it seems like there's been so many hurdles. You know, on one hand, I felt like I understood the political process a little bit because I taught it, okay? But then, you know, there's one thing knowing, say, theory and then the practicality. And so just understanding the bills that you read is the biggest hurdle. I do read all of my bills. I think that's my obligation. And I stay up usually when we're in session. I very seldom get to bed before 1 o'clock. I read my bills, okay? Now, I must confess that doesn't mean I understand everything I read, but I read them all, and those that I don't understand, there's some colleagues that I feel like, you know, we have kindred spirit, if you want to put it that way. They help me, and we all do that. We can't be an expert in everything, and I'm certainly not an expert in anything. But if there is one area that I know more about, it's education. And so, you know, when I read an education bill, something dealing with that, I understand that. And so I have a lot of my colleagues that say they look to see how I'm going to vote on an issue, how I'm going to vote on a particular education bill. And then I have those that I trust that, okay, you know, I read this bill. What exactly does this mean here? What would be the consequences, et cetera, et cetera. And they tell me where they stand on it, what they think it means. And then I look at it again and I understand it a little bit better. Bottom line is I still make my own choice. I always make my own choice, but I do depend upon some of my trusted colleagues to help me understand some things. So that's the biggest challenge for me.
Well, how does it feel being one of the minority women of the group? I think there's 19 both chambers this year.
Well, I think you're about right. Well, to be honest with you, I compare it to when I was teaching and being a coach, a women's coach. Because, you know, the men coaches are the ones who, you know, there's just the good old boy club, okay, in public schools among the coaches and everything, you know, and women we're just women, so we're not in there. There's that here.
Still.
Mm-hmm. There still is. Now, that does not mean, I do not mean by that the men are not polite. They are. They're not thoughtful. They are. That they're not helpful. They are. But, you know, personally, I'm not going to go hang out with the men because I don't think that would be appropriate, you know. Guys can just hang out with guys and, you know. So, to me, there's a bit of that's just it's just the way it is, and you can't change it. Fine. I don't have a problem with that. Sometimes when it comes to placing people on different committees or doing things, you know, perhaps the women might be a little slighted, you know. But, you know, the way I look at it, it's not about me. And I'm not here to make a name for myself. I'm not here to make sure, hey, that I get recognized here and get on this, you know. I'm here to serve my constituents, and you know that's a big enough job right there. You know, I don't need all the other. Now, if something else were to come, and that's what I feel like I'm supposed to do, well, my motto is God's grace is sufficient. He'll give me what I need to handle every task He puts before me. But yeah, there's some of it here. But I look at them. You know, I'm old enough to be not all, but most of these guys' mother, and so I just kind of treat them like that. But you just can't beat the women, especially the Republican women. I'm much closer to them than I am the ones on the other side of the aisle, but I feel a kindredship with them too. But I mean, my Republican women colleagues are just like sisters. You know, I just love them to death. It's just, you know, it's a unique. I don't want to say club, but you know, it's a unique experience because when there's 57 Republicans, we have caucus meetings together, we go out to eat together, we have a caucus retreat every year together. It's just like a family, you know. And yes, you're closer to some in your family than you are others, and I'm closer to some than others, but we're all family. There's not a single one of them that I don't love and would stand up for.
We'll change the subject just a little bit. Do you remember your first bill that you presented on the floor?
Oh,
and
gosh.
if you were nervous or not?
I'm trying to think. The very first one, not 100%. I'm not really 100%. I do know that I was nervous. I'm really a little bit nervous every time I do, because it's just a unique experience, and you never know whether you're going to get, drilled, from the other side of the aisle, or maybe even some of your own colleagues. But I think probably my first bill was a bill dealing with reading, because that's one of the things that I campaigned on, was if you can read, you can learn. If you can't read, you can't learn. Because see, that's as a teacher, that's what I saw. I saw 12th graders, that's mainly what I taught, who the vast majority of them in the school where I was teaching either could not read, or if they did read, they couldn't read well and they could not comprehend what they read. So you have to ask yourself the question, what kind of education have those students received after 12 county kindergarten, 13 years of school? Not the best, not what they should have received. And my philosophy has always been, and I talked to a lot of teachers. I had a lot of teacher friends down in Texas that taught in elementary school, and from Lone Star where we live. And I called them and I talked to them, and they're the ones that gave me the phrase, if you can read, you can learn. Okay? But actually I came up with that phrase myself, but here's what they told me was, from kindergarten to third grade, you're learning to read. After third grade, you're reading to learn. So it's like a foundation. When you build a house, we don't do the wall first. We don't do the ceiling, the roof. You start with a foundation, and you must have a strong foundation. If you don't have a strong foundation, it doesn't matter how expensive the rest of the materials may be. You're going to have cracks, and you're going to have problems. And my philosophy is, if children are going to learn, they've got to be able to read. See, reading is not a subject matter like history, English, science, math. Reading is a skill. And you need to have that skill down and have it down well so that you can master the subject matters. So my first bill that I ran with Senator Wilcoxon was to allow teachers from kindergarten through third grade, it was part of the Reading Sufficiency Act, we expanded upon that, to allow teachers to spend more time in reading and teach the other competencies through reading. You can read to students about science, about history, And so that was my first bill. And each year, the 3 years that I've been in, I've been able to pass a bill dealing with reading. And I think in time, as we have those children in their foundational years, if they're really learning how to read, they're going to grasp everything else as they get farther up in the grades, and they're not going to get disillusioned. They're not going to feel dumb. They're not going to be lost as much, So.
Any disappointments that you tried to pass and just couldn't, or?
Well,
still hanging out there,
yes. A disappointment was I have been made aware through constituents in my own district about the problem we have here in Oklahoma. We're second in the nation for grandparents raising their grandchildren, and they need help. Okay, they need financial help, and I've told them, I'm a limited government person, and I can't really in good conscience go out and try to get a bill passed that's going to give you money, but you need to know there are already state agencies and services out there that can help grandparents. They don't know what they are. So they need to know what they are. So I've tried to get a bill passed the last 2 years that would give grandparents a little more standing in the courts, because right now they don't have hardly any, and that would require agencies that handle any kind of funds or any kind of programs that grandparents could benefit from to be used for their grandchildren, for those agencies to have to make that information known some way. And both times the bill has passed the House and the Senate hasn't even taken it up. So that has been a disappointment because it's a great need in Oklahoma and across the nation.
Keep bringing it forward.
Well, I very well may.
Well, do you have a role model, mentor, someone you always have looked to, even in the past and still do, or if you want to name names?
Well, you know, the lady that my husband introduced me to, who is definitely a role model for me and has been my mentor, is Kay Dudley, who was a state senator and Governor Keating's appointment secretary. And I guess if you're going to try to interview ladies at the legislature, she would be on my list. She would be on your list. She definitely is a mentor and a model, fine Christian lady, and just a sweetheart. You know, I not being an individual who was a political insider, I guess if you want to say like that, I can't really name anybody that's in politics, you know, on say a state level or a federal level.
Well, do you have a political philosophy?
Do I have a political philosophy? Yes. I'm a strict constructionist. I believe that the Constitution should be observed. I think that the Constitution is a miracle. No nation has survived as long as we have survived. We've had one Constitution in 217 something years. You know, we've been a nation, or the idea of a nation, for our Declaration of Independence. 230 something like that. May not be right on my figures, but you know, you take France has had over 50 constitutions. You've had Peru has had about 10. Russia, every time they get a new leader, our Constitution has stood the test of time because our founding fathers wrote such a marvelous document that gave power to the people. Okay, it was a limited government is what they provided, and I'm a very limited government. I believe my philosophy is limited government that represents the people, because after all, that's what our founding document, our birth certificate, which is the Declaration of Independence, says, that we shall be a government of the consent of the governed, and it's the people's government, and they need to be involved. Okay, I believe it's a government that should. My philosophy is that free markets. You know, government should not be running the show economically. So I'm definitely for free markets. I'm for the individual having their rights. I'm going to have to get something to drink here. Excuse me.
We can edit it out.
Good. Probably going to sneeze here too. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, good. I'll be into that. You know, my part of my philosophy is that we are a Christian nation. We have revisionist history today that tries to say we weren't, that our founding fathers were deists. But one of the things I did when I was teaching, I tried to challenge my students, you go find the primary sources of our founding fathers and read what they had to say. And they would come back and say, you know, they didn't have a problem with God or the separation of church and state, because you can read the diaries of George Washington. You can even read the two most ungodly ones that people try to cite, which is Thomas Jefferson and Franklin, and you will find references to God and specifically to Jesus Christ. You know, so they make modern day Christians, look like we aren't even Christians because they did have a belief. So, my philosophy is real freedom comes when the individual has the right to make the vast majority of decisions for themselves. Government does have a place, yes, because you've got to have a way to tie the people together for the common good. And the people should always have the say-so to change things if they disagree. So my philosophy is very limited government for the individual, free markets. For the family, that's the founding establishment, I guess you could say, for our whole society, not just America, but the whole society. You know. So.
What committees are you a member of? Or
Well, when I was first elected, I was the vice chairman of the Appropriations and Budget Subcommittee on Education. And then I was on Health and Human Services and small business and economic development. This 06 term, I am the chairman of the subcommittee on social services. I am on Common Ed, education, and by virtue of being the chairman of the subcommittee of social services, that puts me on the full committee that's over social services, which is human services.
so you must get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get all this done.
Well, I try not to get up any earlier than I have to. I've learned something that the first 2 years in office, I tried to go to everything. Sometimes there would be 2 or 3 breakfasts in the morning, maybe as early as 7, 7:30, 8. And some of them might be here in the Capitol, some would be elsewhere, and I would try to get up and go to all of them. Usually we'd have lunches here in the Capitol. And then there would be a reception, sometimes 2 and 3 receptions, and then a dinner. And I went to everything because I felt like I needed to get to know everybody. But my third session, no longer did I get up to go to breakfasts, unless it was just really a particular organization I really wanted to go to, because I felt like I needed my rest, to be honest with you. And then I cut out a lot of the receptions and a few of the dinners. And now that I'm a grandmother, my grandson is 3 months old, when session starts up again, if I try to do things the way I've done them, even with cutting out last session, I won't get to see him except on the weekends, and that's not acceptable. So I'll cut out more.
You live close enough to live at home.
I do.
You don't have
Yes,
to.
I live about 10 miles
It's not
from the Capitol.
like some have to.
I know. I really don't know that they have my admiration, those that live out in the state and come in and leave their family for a whole week, and then those that have small children. I just don't know if I could have done it. I'm thankful the Lord didn't lead me to do this at that time in my life.
I'm kind of figuring that's why more women don't do it.
I think that's probably why.
Just speculation, but
Yeah.
one of my guesses. So, would you encourage other women to go into politics, and what would you tell them?
Well, I would if they have an interest, and I would if they have 100% cooperation and approval of their husbands, because this can be hard on a marriage. Fortunately, my husband being a minister, he was always gone a lot at nights, out visiting and meetings and things like that. So, we just grew up like that, and of course, I guess it's just our personalities. I'm a pretty independent person. I'm not one of these people that I have to have my husband around me all the time. He's not the kind of man that has to, have his wife around him all the time. We have a date every Friday night. We're very close. We talk a lot, but we're very, very secure in our marriage. But if even people that are secure in their marriage, it can be hard on the marriage, because there are a lot of times when you won't see your spouse very often, especially when we're in session, and you have to make that a high priority. You have to have a spouse a husband who acknowledges that, accepts that, and doesn't feel threatened in any way, and who's willing to be a part. I mean, I could not, if my dear husband had not supported me and helped me, and I mean, he stood on street corners the day of the election, held signs and had a sign in the back of his car. I mean, oh man, I could never have been here without his help. And so I would say, if you have an interest to run, make sure your husband is 100% on board, and try to make him as aware as you can of what it's going to be like, because you're not going to see much.
Cook much either.
Oh, cooking. What's that? Or clean.
That's good. That would be a concern for some, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, my husband's very good about that. Matter of fact, he was a cook in the Marines. He was in the Marines. So, he's probably a better cook. He's as good a cook as I, if not better. And so he has no problem. And we don't mind eating out, just the two of us.
Some of the women that I've interviewed, or most of them, have said they've lost weight while they were campaigning, and they regained it once they got in office. Because you're
That
always
is so true.
invited to things.
Well, you meet and eat. You sit and eat. It's kind of like a joke. It's kind of like the Baptist church. In the Baptist church, we meet and eat and take an offering. Here, we just don't take an offering.
So that's true. Or do you have a favorite campaign story? Anything that just made you stop and laugh, or
Oh gosh.
no dog bites?
Oh well, I had only one of those. I'm very afraid of dogs. I've been attacked 5 times already, and so that was a big no. Growing up, I used to be a jogger. A couple of experiences there, but and that was my biggest fear. Lord, please don't let me run into any dogs. So, I'm trying to think. Since I didn't have to campaign second time, the biggest thing I remember about campaigning, and that people made fun of me about, was I seemed to trip all the time, and they really made fun of me about that. Matter of fact, I tripped one time and injured my shoulder and had to have shoulder surgery. So they joke about that. But I guess one thing that's kind of funny, like I say, I hadn't planned on running for politics, and when we moved here, I didn't mention this, just so happened the home that we ended up buying was the home of my predecessor. He was moving farther out into the district. And so when I was running, one of the things that I'd always say when I spoke or, knocked on doors, I had the opportunity was, my predecessor was Bill Graves. And so I would say, I moved into one house in Bill Graves. I'd just like to move into his other house now, and people got a kick out of that. So
Did you have a campaign slogan?
Yes, I did. And I have to give up front credit to my wonderful husband. Vote Kern conservative. And I would have, vote, and then Kern was like, I think in all capital letters, red, I think, and then conservative was smaller letters in blue. And I've had a lot of people tell me that really was catchy. Matter of fact, I do remember one night I was knocking on the door, and it was on 36th Street, and a young lady came, and I was talking with her, and she said, I just want to say this. She said, I'm in PR work, and she said, I want you to know that your slogan, Vote Conservative, is fantastic because it ties a person and an idea together. She says, that was really good. So, oh yeah, I told my husband that, so he gets all the credit for that. I was going to have Rally Round Sally, and he, everybody,
too,
yeah, no, my son said that's too cheesy, so.
You'll have to see if you have a campaign sign left. You'll have to.
Yeah, I do. I have some.
Collection.
I have some.
All right. So, other than the late nights, anything else? Has anything else changed because you come to work in this office in your life?
Well, I think I've become a little bolder. I mean, I know what I believe, and I'm not afraid to stand up for my beliefs. I think I've become a little bolder in doing that. And one of the things that I feel very strongly about, you know, when somebody comes in and wants to talk to me about something, an issue, or when a lobbyist comes in, one of the things that my friend Kay Dudley said to me that I try to operate by is be slow to commit. Okay, but when say a lobbyist comes in and gives me their side of the story, I'll listen, but I don't commit myself. Here comes the next lobbyist with the other side. I'll listen, but I won't commit myself. And I try to really weigh the two and then know where I stand and then tell them. You know, I'm not going to let somebody come in here to my office and try to persuade me into something. You know, if it's not what I believe, if it's not what I feel comfortable about, I'm going to tell them so. I think I owe them that. I think I owe my constituents that. And one of the things, you know, I'm just amazed at all the parallels between being a minister's wife and being an elected official. Don't ask me what they are because I can't, you know, unless something happens, I can't think of them. But one of the things I would tell, the 3 different times we've gone to churches, we've only been to 3 churches since we tend to stay, but I would tell the people, usually they have a women's meeting, you know, where the prospective pastor's wife can meet the women. And I would tell them, look, what you see is what you get. I just try to be me, and if you like me, great, and if you don't, you know. And so that's what I try to do here. You know, I just think a lot of problems could be solved if everybody's just honest and open and right out front, you know. And so I'm not going to try to, you know, make you think one thing when I'm thinking something else. You know? And if you ask me something and I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know.
Yeah, like my parent says, I don't know, but I can find out.
Yeah, I always said that a lot when I was teaching. Yes.
I don't know, but I can find out. I don't know if we want to get in the individual bills or things. You supported Tabor.
I did.
And reading was your main thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to change your wardrobe when you switched from,
Oh, yes.
from being a school teacher?
I sure did. I had to go out and buy some dress suits, and I've got to lose weight so I can get in them. Because you do gain weight, you know. And I've got a few that I still can't get into, so I'm still working on that. But yes, I did, you know, and I got more pantsuits too, nice pantsuits, because when I was teaching, I always, most of the time I wore slacks and a jacket or a, you know, nice blouse or something, and nice shoes. Occasionally, at least once a week, I try to wear a dress or a skirt or something, because my philosophy there was, I'm the teacher, they're the students, I need to look like the teacher, okay, not like one of them. So I did have to upgrade my wardrobe.
I've been told the chambers are cold, so you have to wear.
Oh, the chambers are freezing. Matter of fact, I have an Afghan that I take in there, and we use my Afghan. Yeah, we could save the state a lot of money if we turn up the AC.
Well, have you gotten to travel much?
I have, and I've traveled more so than I thought I would. I don't travel on the state's, you know, the taxpayers' money. I have one time, which the Speaker Hyde asked me and a fellow, Ann Cootie, to go to a Southern Regional Education Board meeting, and that was on the tax dollar. But mostly I you know, well, like you go to ALEC meeting, you get reimbursed for that. You use campaign funds, you get reimbursed, and or I pay my own way, you know. But I've been a little more traveling than I thought. But I'm pretty picky about what I go to. I don't go to every meeting because I like to be at home for one thing. But there are some meetings that I would try not to miss because I think they're very educational for me as a legislator.
So after you finish up your term limits, what do you envision yourself doing?
Well, if I get to serve out 12 years, I will be 70 years old. So I'm not going to do anything.
Care of my
I'm
grandbabies.
going to take care of grandbabies, watch grandbabies, of course, work in my church, and I hope I'm still able to play golf then. You know, I'm sure that I will be try to be involved, you know, through Republican Women's Club or something like that. But I have no plans to lobby to find some other position.
Oh, golfers will be curious about what your handicap is.
Well,
You want to share?
not as low as I'd like it to be. I have about a 25, 26 handicap. So you know, I hit around 100. It's been a long time since I've broken 110. Before I hurt my shoulder, and when I'm playing regularly, I can usually break 100, and I'm happy with that. My goal was to break 90, but I don't know that. Running for office is hard on your golf game.
How often do you get to play?
Not as often as I like. I haven't played in 2 weeks. Oh, actually, I didn't even play 2 weeks. We went on vacation and we played golf, so that was the 1st of September. So I haven't played in about a month.
My dad plays.
Does he? Yeah.
He scores his age when he's tickled.
Does he? Oh yeah.
He's
Oh, what I've
70, so
Oh, hey, I'd be on the pro circuit if I could hit my age. So, no, I just, if I can hit under 100, I'm pleased as punch. I just love being out there. You know, I don't get, when I was coaching, I had to learn, I've always been a very competitive person, played sports growing up. And so before I started coaching girls golf, I would get frustrated out on the course when I didn't hit a shot I thought I would hit. But when I started coaching golf, you have to teach the girls, the most important shot is the one you're about to make. If you've messed up on that one before, you just got to forget it. You've got to play controlled. And that just helped me a whole lot, and my game's been better. So.
Well, how has the media, responded to you? Or that was something you'd have to learn to adjust to?
Yes. I think being a school teacher where I've talked, even though it's been talked in front of people, even though it's been students, has helped me. I have a couple of, I'm thinking of one, I won't say her name, who's just petrified to speak, on the floor, but I think she does a good job. And I'm not petrified to speak, and I think that comes from teaching school. As far as the media, I would much prefer to be behind the camera. I don't care to ever be on the camera, but there have been occasions when I have been, and so I try to, I've learned you be very brief, short sentences, because then they can't splice here and here and here and make it look like you're saying something you aren't saying.
You need to be thinking constantly.
You do. So so it's okay. It's not. It's way down on the bottom of my list of things, favorite things. I'm really surprised there's one issue you haven't asked me about. Well, that's the issue of when I was first selected. The library issue. And that's kind of a funny story. I think it's funny. When I was knocking on doors, I just told people. I was campaigning. I just told them up front. Matter of fact, my spiel was, hello, I'm Sally Kern. I'm running for state representative, District 84. Bill Graves is term limited out. That's why he's not running. I want you to know that I'm running as a decidedly Christian candidate because I believe we're in a cultural war for the very existence of our Judeo-Christian values. And if you agree with me, I would love to have your vote. And if you don't, I'm not the person you want. That's what I would say. Still got it down, okay? And see, I had no problem saying that because, like I say, when I first started, I didn't care whether I won or lost. Well, actually, I didn't care if I won because I just wanted to keep on teaching. So that's just what I said, okay? Well, I got elected. The very 1st of March, the session started in February. The very 1st of March, I get this phone call from a young constituent who said, Representative Kern, I remember what you said when you came to my door, how you were running as a Christian candidate. I have an issue I want to share with you. She shared about their daughter going and getting this book. And I promise you, at that time we had different desks, and my desk was over there. And you're probably not old enough to remember the cartoon Little Lulu, where the devil was on one shoulder and the angel on the other. Man, that's what I thought of that day. It's like on one shoulder was, the angel was saying, the Lord was saying, this is why I put you here. You're here to be a values representative. On the other shoulder was, oh man, I've just barely had a month. I don't want to do something like this, because I knew immediately it's going to be a confrontational issue. But I knew without a doubt that's why I'm here, to stand up for values like that, traditional family values. So, that led to going to the local library, metropolitan area. That led to finally the next session, a bill. That particular session, the first session, we just did a resolution. The next session, we did a bill, which I ended up winning Mouth of the House award.
Okay.
Because and the only reason I did is because that bill, the library bill, the debate on that bill was something like, if I remember correctly, an hour and 45 minutes, something like that. The other bill that I ran, which was controversial, which I firmly believe in, is the teaching the controversy of evolution. Not teaching creationism, not teaching intelligent design. I don't want to go there because I know you would lose that. But let's just teach the pros and cons of evolution, because there are some arguments against it that even the leading evolutionists say. We teach the pros and cons of everything else. Even in America, we teach what's wrong with America, and we teach about all these other countries and their forms of government, And that debate was like, I forget how long, but they were not quite as long. Question and answer time in debate, So that's how I got the Mouth of the House award. But I got a lot of media attention from those two things. And the thing I learned is the media doesn't really care about the truth. They want a story. The teaching the controversy bill never once in the paper was portrayed correctly. It was always portrayed as intelligent design and creationism. No, I don't want to do that. Let's just take what the leading evolutionists are saying, their doubts, their problems with evolution, and show those to the kids so that students will know this is a theory. This is not fact. It's a theory. Anyway, so, it's interesting. I find it interesting. I don't do it hardly at all. I don't do it at all anymore. I did do it every now and then. You can go on, say, Google or yahoo.com and just type in my name, and you get all of the stuff. Of course, it's all from these real left-wing homosexual groups, and I'm just Hitler, I'm just the worst thing there is, and I never once said that I hated them, because I don't. Matter of fact, when I taught school, I had a homosexual teacher about 4 or 5 doors down, and the kids would ask me questions, and I'd say, that person has the right to choose that lifestyle. They don't have the right to force it on you or anybody else, and that's what I believe, and I never treated that individual mean or harsh, never would, never will, because they are people just like me that need to be respected, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with what they do. But, according to everything that was written, I hated them. No, I don't. I don't hate anybody. So anyway.
Glad you brought it up. I wasn't going to push you to.
Oh, no. It doesn't bother me. It's something that I believe. I think it's a big threat. I think I think the homosexual agenda, and when I say the homosexual agenda, I mean the political aspect of it, where they're trying to push that lifestyle on Americans to say it is normal and natural. That is very detrimental to our country. You have to just look at the statistics. I'm probably getting more things than you want. Because it's a deadly lifestyle. Do we really want that on our children? Plus, too, it's playing on the natural development of children. when the hormones haven't kicked in yet, little girls only want to play with little girls and little boys only want to play with little boys. Normal, natural development. Let's don't pervert that.
Have I missed anything that I need to ask that I haven't?
Well, I don't know that you have. I think a very important, something that probably isn't mentioned a lot, something I think is real important up here is RLAs. They make us look good. They do a lot more work than people think.
Which is what?
A legislative assistant. In the Senate, they're called EAs, executive assistant, do the same things. But I tell you, they really deserve a lot of credit because they do a lot of good stuff. They keep us on task. They answer a lot of constituent things for us, and I have a great one, and I'm very thankful to have her.
Did you know her? Did she come with you?
No, she did not come with me. I had.
You get to pick your own? Then?
You do. You get to hire your own, and so I hired an individual who had been up here before, and she only ended up working just one session. Her family problems. Her mother was getting older, and she needed to be with her. So, did I have somebody else the next year? I can't even remember. Anyway, TJ's been with me. No, I think I got TJ after that. So she's been with me 2 sessions. And she better stay as long as I'm here.
I think that's a group we need to interview next, ones that have been around.
Oh, yeah.
15, 20
Oh, yeah.
years or so.
They know a lot. They're good people. Good gals. Most of them are women. Not all of them. There's a man or two here and there.
Does she do some of your research for you, or do you have someone else that does that when you're researching a bill?
She doesn't usually do that. We have staff that does that. And then, to be honest with you, I have a couple of people who have said, they're just people who are just average citizens who say, I really support you. I really believe in you. I don't have a lot of money. I'll help you any way I can. And so what I say to them is, look, because we get bills thrown at us so fast, if I have a bill that I would really like some research on, can I give it to you? And I've got a jewel. She lives in Tulsa, and she's a jewel. And they were really very helpful. And I've just had another one not too long ago come up and say that, and who's worked for somebody on the federal level, and so I think she would do a good job, so she's going to help me.
It's not a one-man job, is it?
No, it's not. It's,
one-woman job.
One man, one woman. No, it's and I guess I'll close with this unless you want to ask me something else. Every day when I'm driving up, and I generally come up Lincoln here, and I see this dome, this Capitol, and I promise you, there's very few days that I don't say this. I look at that dome, and I just thank God for the opportunity to be here, and I say this. I say, it's not about me, and not I, but Christ. I mean, that's who I am. That's my motivation, okay? And, I've had somebody say to me, this isn't Sunday school, it isn't church, you can't operate like that. And what I say to them is, hey, I know it's not Sunday school, I know it's not church, but you know what? I believe the Bible, and the Bible's a book of principles, and it operates anywhere and everywhere. And I'm going to try as best as I can live by biblical principles. Does that mean I always follow them and apply them correctly to everything? No, but my intent is to try to do that, and so it's not about me, and for me that's real important because Lord Acton many years ago in England said absolute power absolutely corrupts, and when you are an elected official, you have power. You have a place of prestige, status, influence, and I believe that all of us need to make sure that we remember it's not about us. It's about the people who elected us. It's about serving them and keeping our eyes on them and not thinking that we're something really important. Because, somebody said this right after we were elected in some meeting. They said being an elected official is like putting a coat on. Nice coat, man. As long as you've got that coat on, you are special. There's going to come a time, though, you're not going to be an elected official anymore, and the coat's going to come off, and nobody's going to care. you're just plain old Sally again. So, you know, why be puffed up while I'm wearing the coat? Just as humbly as I can, try to do the job, you know. Now, do I have to have people at times tell me, hey, you need to watch? Yes, and I've got a few people, I've told them, look, if you think that I'm getting too big for my britches, I want to know it. Okay. Okay, what's your last question?
My last question is, when history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
When history is written about me, what would I like it to say? I would like it to say she's a woman who loved the Lord, who tried to serve Him, and as best as she knew how, stood up for what He wanted her to do.
So far, you're doing just that, right?
I'm trying. I'm a sinner saved by grace. I'm going to make mistakes, but when I do, I want to be big enough or humble enough to say I made a mistake. You know, because Scripture says if you cover over your mistakes, you're not going to prosper. You know, and at the end of the day, I put my head on that pillow. I want to be able to go to sleep because I have peace.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Well,
it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, well, thanks for being patient, you know.